Intuition. What is it? How do we deepen it? And how do we let it lead us so that we can move forward more effortlessly? In an age of AI, this is going to be the thing that separates people who make incredible success in a way that feels like a flow state versus people who have to try really, really hard to make things happen. I've been in both camps, and I have seen that leading from my intuition has not only brought the most aligned, most efficient results, but it has truly changed my life as someone who has a podcast, a business, and who is also becoming a mother. So today we're going to talk about intuition. I'm going to share a little bit about my story with developing intuition and ultimately how you can deepen your relationship with yours. Welcome to Confessions of a Spiritual Entrepreneur. This show is about what it takes to build something in public, a business, a body of work, a brand, or a creative project so that you reach the right people. Right now, I am very pregnant while running my company, so that journey will probably make its way into the show too. Let's get into it. When we're talking about intuition, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. And that is, intuition is this sixth sense that everyone is born with. So even people who hear the word intuition and are a little afraid or think it's some sort of woo-woo thing, that's not the case. And I'm going to break down why in a moment. I think the other group of listeners are those who do feel like they have an intuitive sense, but they're not quite sure, how do I deepen my relationship with that so I can hear it more clearly or follow it more efficiently? Now, I am someone who likes to bridge two worlds. So I like to look at things from a pragmatic point of view, and I like to see the spiritual side. And I think intuition is one of those topics that falls between the cracks. We first need to clear the air on intuition. You're not going to just all of a sudden start seeing ghosts one day because our intuition is a part of us. It is quite literally something that we are born with, and we have all different ways of communicating with our intuition. It is a way of receiving information that guides us, and it always has our best interests at heart. It is never leading us astray. It is part of our soul or spirit, and it is aligned with our true path, if you will. I have worked with so many clients who come to me and say, I kind of have this weird thing. Sometimes I see colors, or sometimes I get these little nudges. And I always pause them and say, it's not weird. And in fact, I see it over and over and over and over again with people across the spectrum. We're talking all different industries and everyone who's just starting a business to a multimillionaire serial entrepreneur. And oftentimes, what I've caught myself saying recently when people ask me, like, what's your advice for someone making less than $10,000 a month? And what's your advice for someone making over $100,000 a month, which is a huge difference? I advise deepen your intuition because we are living in early times of AI. And we have no idea how AI is going to change the way that we live and work. But what is very apparent to me is that the way AI thinks is highly logical. So when it comes to planning or strategies, everyone is looking to AI to speed up those things and to give them what they need to grow whatever they care about. But the thing that gets lost that AI cannot replace is human intuition, as well as creativity. It just does not have the human creative muscle that we have. And creativity and our intuition are like two sides of the same coin. If you've ever listened to Rick Rubin or certain creative guides, mentors, they all say the same thing. It's all about getting out of your own way to receive that information, to let that creativity flow, to get into that flow state. And intuition, honestly, is pretty similar. We have to get out of our way to let intuition come through. So now that we're all on the same page here, let's talk about how intuition manifests itself. So, okay, what is your sixth sense? And everyone's going to be a little different. What I often suggest is that there's a moment of recognition. Sometimes that's as an early child, and you have to think back to, did I have make believe friends, or did I ever just blurt things out that freaked my parents out? That could be an early sign. But maybe you don't remember that far. Maybe it's just a moment in your life where the stakes were high or emotions were high, and you had some sort of feeling that you followed and it panned out well. Or vice versa, you had a feeling, you did not listen to it, it did not pan out well. That's your intuition just underneath the surface. Now, we tend to shut down our intuition because we're trained not to listen to it. School, we're taught to memorize things and use our logical, rational thinking that says there's choice A or choice B. Intuition often says, well, there's also all these other things and limitless possibilities. So I personally shut this down for the longest time because I was your A student, high achiever, corporate ladder climber. And so I shut down my intuition for many, many years, even though I was practicing yoga and learning about astrology and trying to incorporate the spiritual world into my life, but not really knowing how it fit. And then all of a sudden, it came to a head in 2017. I was going through a pretty intense breakup with someone that I knew we had to split up. We were not a good match. It was awful. But it was still hard to break apart and go through that withdrawing. One day, when I was on the brink of teetering again and maybe staying in that broken relationship, I heard these words: "This is good." Those are the most simple words you could ever imagine. And yet, the way that they landed in my own head from my own voice felt like they were a message for me. We're thinking all the time, and oftentimes we think in our own voice in our heads, but sometimes it carries a different tone to it. It's almost like it's coming in instead of being generated in our brain and moving out. And that's how these words landed. And I remember I physically froze because I was so freaked out. And I was like, well, it was in my head and it was technically in my voice. So this is okay. I'm not going crazy. And I started to hear this voice more often. And whenever it spoke to me, it was always in a really short, punctual sentence. And it felt like this North Star compass. It wanted me to move a certain direction. And I followed that. And I'm so happy I left that relationship. I ended up making some really big decisions in my life over that next year, including like leaving my home of San Francisco for 9 years, quitting my job without anything else lined up, traveling. And that was the start of my relationship, trusting my intuition. Because here's the secret: however our intuition comes in, when we listen to it and follow it, we are deepening trust with our intuition, meaning that that muscle of ours, that sixth sense, gets stronger. It gets clearer. And suddenly, fast forward to today, intuition is how I live my entire life. I wake up and I try and feel out the day and see, like, where does my energy want to go today? I run my business from intuition more than the logical, rational side these days. And I am about to become a mother. I'm recording this at 36 weeks pregnant. So, a mother's intuition is about to come online full force and be a huge part of my life in a different way. And why I mention these things is because when we listen to our intuition, that is when our goals, our dreams, our successes actually manifest themselves. It's not about chanting affirmations over and over. It is about trusting this deeper compass that is trying to say, hey, move right or move left. Do this, not that. And when we listen to that, serious magic happens. So, how do you tap into your intuition? That sixth sense. The very first step is reflection. When have you had those nudges or those feelings, or maybe heard a thought or had a dream, whatever it was that told you, hey, don't do this or do this? And when you didn't listen, and then you're like, oh, I knew it. I knew I shouldn't have done that thing, or I knew I should have taken that chance. If you backtrack, hit pause, and then try and dissect, how did that information come in? That's a great first clue as to how intuition is trying to communicate with you. So there are many different ways, and they often call them the clairs, which you've probably heard of, but we're going to expand a little bit on them today. Because what I've seen is that it's not so simple. A lot of people actually have multiple ways that intuition comes through. And so as I go through these, take note if you've ever had an experience where you maybe kind of felt it, even if it felt really, really subtle. Because our intuition, especially if we haven't been listening to it, is typically really soft. It's like a whisper. It's like a little nudge. And then the more we work with it, the clearer it gets. So there's clairvoyance, which is probably one of the most common clairs that people have heard about. And that is like a flash vision or seeing something. And oftentimes clairvoyants also have very visual dreams. I also know a lot of artists that are clairvoyant because they're such visual processors. There is also clairaudience. So like my example from 2017, that's often when we're hearing our own voice talk to us. Now, of course, some people have a different voice or it has a different personality to it. I had one client who had clairaudience, and the voice that kind of talked to her in her head was her voice, but it was super high pitched and bubbly. And it had this personality that was very peppy. And that's how it liked to communicate with her. Versus mine, in my example, very pragmatic, super, super simple, very few words. It doesn't matter how it comes in or what it sounds like, but typically, if we have that inner voice, it's very different than our own thinking thoughts. It's typically not a question, it is a statement, like mine, this is good. That was a clear statement of, hey, follow this, break up with the guy. And thank God I did. I have the most amazing husband in the world now. So, clairaudience, just pay attention if it feels like you're receiving words, even if they're your own voice. Now, some of the others are clairsentience. This is usually a body feeling. So I've had a lot of this while being pregnant, where I'll kind of be in between two decisions and I'll think about one decision and I'll get a feeling in my body. I'll think about another and I notice how my body changes. So I shared this in my first trimester reflections episode. I highly recommend listening to that because that was really when this body sensation intuition came online for me. And I've used it to make really important decisions. I ended up simplifying my business, and my body was like this instrument for understanding what feels good and what's right versus what feels like shut down or wrong. This is a really common one too, because if you've ever met someone and you're like, oh, they gave me an icky feeling, that's what this is. It's your intuition saying, hey, something's not right with that person. I'm going to keep my distance. Or vice versa. Wow, that person has such great energy. I feel good as me around them. That's a positive signal. Our intuition, again, is always trying to point us in the right direction. Now, there are other clairs. There's one that's just like a knowing. It's just like you don't know how to explain it, but you just know. And it's like this instant, immediate thing. Even more subtle ones are there's a sense of smell. So some people will smell something that's not in the room, and that's an indicator, or they will taste something. And so there's actually a fantasy book I can go and try and find the name of and put it in the show notes. But the main character had this. So let's say she was in a situation and started tasting something metallic that told her, hey, get out of this situation quickly. Or if she had a taste of like sweetness, I think she liked sweets in the book, then it was a positive signal. These ones are so nuanced because there's so many different types of scents and so many different types of tastes. But that's where over time you start tracking and seeing different patterns. Now, I encourage people to just be open to any of them. And there's more. I had a client once come to me and she was like, I see color around people. And I know that sounds crazy. It's not like I look at you and I see yellow, but it's almost like in my mind's eye, I get this sense of yellow. Or some people have different combinations of things where they can taste a color or see a scent. And even though that sounds like, holy hell, how does that happen in the brain? It does happen. So know that if you've ever received information and it feels like some weird combination of these things, that's completely valid. That is your brain receiving information. The last one I'll mention is external information or stimuli. So this is often when people do automatic writing. They will just pick up a pen and write and see what comes through. And then at certain points, it almost might feel like someone else is writing or their hand is just going and they're not even thinking. That's a huge one. Another one, dreams, prophetic dreams. I think I've shared on this podcast before that I had a dream of my husband about 6 months before I met him. And dreams are very, very important. The more that we trust them, write them down, and actually start to see patterns and symbols, that is also our intuition speaking to us. Another one that's big in my own life is just these external things like music or signs. So I know angel numbers are a big one. People will see like 222 or 444 on a license plate. And to them, that is a sign. That is their intuition saying, hey, keep going or change something, whatever it may be. And then other people might get information from music. And this is actually a big one for me. Sometimes if I'm wrestling with something, I'll just turn on the radio and then see what pops up. So, for example, when I was trying to conceive, I put on the radio and there was this song like Baby, 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 something like that. And the way that I received that was like, hey, the baby's coming. Like, you don't have to rush it. You don't have to get so stressed out about timing or this fertility journey. Just be patient. And all it was a song, but because of the way it landed and it felt like it landed in my body, it felt like this sign. So the first step is recognition and just noticing how is it coming in? And then two, it's building trust with that. Anytime you feel those little nudges or whispers, however they may come in for you, follow them. When you follow them, there is more trust. You will pick up on them more quickly. They will be stronger. And then it starts to become this sixth sense muscle that really gets to guide you. And you get to receive that. And I think that's this third thing is that you all deserve a strong relationship with your intuition. And that is going to be the thing that sets you out ahead of the pack, basically. Like as a creative, a creator, an entrepreneur, as someone who shows up in public for what they do. There is so much pressure and there is so much hard work that goes into that. So our intuition makes all of that a lot easier. And when we listen to that, we bypass all of the super hard work that you don't need to do. You do not need to consult AI for every strategy and plan and step of your path forward. When you listen to your intuition, you understand this is what I'm going to do. And it's like getting on this super highway because you receive the information you need in the right moment. You know the next step. And then, yeah, of course, there's a place for AI in everything. And AI will definitely be a part of our lives in many different ways, but it does not have to be the thing that guides every single decision. I'm like sweating as I record this. I'm so hot. Because I think, like, even this podcast, for example, there have been episodes in the past where I have consulted ChatGPT or Claude to like brainstorm a topic and look at research and compile an outline. And guess what? Those episodes were not fun to record. And then they did not sound good. And even when I tried to have fun and made them sound good, they didn't land well. Even when they were strategic and SEO optimized, all the things. But when I sit down to record and I let intuition guide me, those are the episodes that I get messages about where people land in my email or my DM saying, oh my God, I listened to this episode and it just hit every single word. I felt like you were talking directly to me. Guess what, babes? That's intuition at work. So follow it. And the last thing I'll say here is like, I'm about to become a mom. I am going to have to rely on my intuition for learning my baby's cues and moving through all of it, which is pretty crazy to say. But especially as someone who has a podcast and is becoming a mother, like that is something that my intuition is leading. And I'm very comfortable with my intuition leading it because I trust it to take me where I need to go. My intuition from the very start of this journey has been like, yo, this podcast is important. Like this show is a huge part of what I do and I'm coming back to it. So yes, this is also my little announcement. I'm about to hit maternity leave, but I will absolutely be back. You can definitely check out YouTube, all of my videos there, shorts there that you can binge, which are just like snippets from old episodes. So check that out. And if you want to stay tuned and be one of the first people that learns when I am back from maternity leave, you can subscribe to my newsletter at samanthafackler.com/newsletter. If you enjoyed today's podcast episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future conversations like this one. There is so much more in store on intuition, on following these invisible sources of information that have our best interest at heart, and really going after what is your purpose? How do you make that impact? And how do you make it feel good? So with that, I will catch you next time. Thanks for being here.